Rain poured across the metallic roofs of the small outpost, making a steady drumming sound that echoed in the empty valley. Lightning flashed across the alien sky, painting the landscape in pale blue light. Inside a small maintenance shed sat Jake, a human engineer who had been sent to repair broken drones and outdated defense towers. He lived alone on the edge of the alien territory, a place most humans avoided. But Jake liked peace, the quiet sound of rain, and the company of his old robot, Rusty, who beeped softly beside him. The clock on the wall blinked past midnight. Jake leaned back on his chair, sipping from a metal mug, staring at the storm outside. The lights flickered once, then twice. He sighed, thinking it was another power surge caused by the wind. But then over the noise of thunder came a sound that didn't belong. A faint knock. At first Jake ignored it, assuming it was just the storm. But then it came again, louder this time, desperate and uneven. Knock, knock, knock. He stood frowning and reached for his plasma torch. No one ever came here, not at this hour. Not in weather like this. When he opened the door, a cold gust hit his face, and there she was, a small alien girl drenched in rain, her silvery hair plastered against her forehead. Her skin glowed faintly under the lightning, pale blue with tiny patterns that shimmered like stars. Her eyes, large, glowing green, looked straight at him with fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Hide me. Please hide me from my father." Jake froze. He had seen many aliens during his years working on outer colonies, but never one like her, so young, so frightened. And the word father made him uneasy. What kind of father chased a child into a storm? "Come inside," he said finally. Stepping aside, she stumbled in, dripping water across the floor, hugging a small satchel close to her chest. Jake locked the door and threw a blanket around her. "Who are you?" he asked, keeping his tone calm. She didn't answer right away, only looked at the window as if expecting someone to appear. "Please," she repeated softly. "He must not find me." Her voice trembled in a way that made Jake's chest tighten. He could tell she was scared beyond reason. He wanted to ask who her father was, but her hands shook so badly that he instead went to make her warm tea. As he poured the steaming liquid into a cup, she sat on the edge of a metal chair, her small fingers gripping that strange satchel tightly. "You're safe here," Jake said, handing her the cup. She looked at him with doubt, then sipped carefully. The steam rose against her shimmering skin, making her look like something out of a dream. Jake tried to smile. "Storm will pass soon. You can rest." But she shook her head quickly. "No, you don't understand. If he finds me, everyone dies." The words froze him in place. Before he could ask more, thunder rolled again. Shaking the windows outside, the wind howled like a living thing. Jake turned on the radar screen, and his heart sank. 3 unidentified signals were approaching from the east ridge. Small, fast-moving, too fast for civilian crafts. His gut told him this wasn't a coincidence. "Who's coming?" he asked, his voice low. The girl looked up at him, her eyes glowing brighter. "Hunters," she said, almost whispering the word like a curse. Jake stepped back and turned off the main lights. Plunging the room into darkness, Rusty beeped nervously. Sensing his master's tension, Jake moved toward the storage hatch. Pulling it open, a small compartment beneath the floor where he kept old equipment. "Get in," he told her. "Hide there until I say it's safe." She hesitated, clutching the bag. "You don't have to help me." Jake gave her a firm look. "Maybe not, but I'm doing it anyway." For a second, their eyes met, human and alien, 2 strangers bound by fear and something unspoken. Then she crawled into the compartment, the metal door sliding shut behind her. Moments later, the sound of engines roared overhead. Jake looked out through a narrow window, his jaw tightening. Bright lights cut through the rain. 3 search drones hovered above his workshop, scanning the area with red beams. Someone out there was looking for her, and they were close. He turned off all power, plunging the outpost into shadow. The only light came from lightning flashes outside. Reflecting in his tired eyes, Jake moved to the door and listened. The storm covered most sounds, but through the noise, he thought he heard voices, mechanical, distorted, alien. He gripped his plasma torch tighter. Whatever was in that bag, whoever her father was, Jake knew this was no simple family fight. Something much bigger was about to unfold, and in that moment, he understood one thing. By opening that door, he had stepped into a storm far greater than the one outside. The storm had passed, but the air inside the outpost still felt heavy. The hum of the power lines had not yet returned, and faint blue light from the emergency lamp filled the room. Jake sat near the hidden floor hatch, listening to the soft, even breathing coming from beneath it. The alien girl was asleep at last. Clutching that mysterious satchel to her chest, he hadn't slept, not even for a second. Every sound outside made him think the soldiers were coming back. When the first light of dawn touched the rocky hills, Jake finally lifted the hatch and whispered, "It's morning, you can come out now." The girl blinked, her glowing eyes adjusting to the dim light. "Are they gone?" she asked, voice trembling. "For now," Jake said, offering her a hand. "But I need answers." She hesitated, then slowly climbed out, still holding the satchel like her life depended on it. He poured her a small bowl of broth. She looked too young to be part of any war, yet the fear in her eyes spoke of things far older than her age. "What's your name?" he asked gently. After a pause, she said, "Lyra." It was a soft name, one that didn't match the danger chasing her. "Lyra," Jake repeated. "Why is your father looking for you? What's inside that bag?" Her grip tightened on it. "He must not find it," she whispered. "If he does, many will die." Jake frowned. "That's not an answer." Her lips trembled and she looked toward the window. "You wouldn't believe me," he sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Try me. I've seen enough strange things on this planet." For a long time she stayed silent. Then she said, barely audible, "It's my mother." Jake blinked, confused. "Your mother?" Lyra nodded, opening the satchel slightly, just enough for him to see a faint blue light coming from within. The light pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Before he could lean closer, she quickly shut it again. "It's her heart," she said, her voice breaking. Not a real one anymore. But her energy, her essence. Jake stared, not sure what to say. He had heard of alien energy cores, artifacts capable of storing life essence, but they were myths. Forbidden technology, if that was true. Then this small girl was carrying something the whole galaxy would kill for. "Your father wants it," Jake said quietly, "doesn't he?" She nodded, tears rolling down her glowing cheeks. "He wants to use it to power his armies and to burn new worlds." Jake's stomach turned. "So you ran away with it," he said, half in awe, half in fear. Lyra's small hands shook as she wiped her tears. "She made me promise to keep it safe, even if I had to run forever." The words echoed in the small metal room like a prayer. Jake walked to the window and looked out at the pale, misty horizon. He could see the faint smoke trails from the landing crafts far away. The soldiers hadn't gone far, they were still searching. He turned back to Lyra. "You can't stay here," he said. "They'll find you." Her head lowered. "Then where can I go?" Jake didn't have an answer. Not yet. Rusty beeped softly and rolled closer, projecting a faint radar display from its eye. 3 red dots were moving again, toward the outpost. Slowly but surely, Jake cursed under his breath. "They're scanning every building," he muttered. "We've got maybe 10 minutes." Lyra hugged the satchel tight. Her fear returning, Jake grabbed his tool belt and threw on his jacket. "All right," he said. "If you're staying with me." "You follow orders," she blinked at him. Confused. "I'm not a soldier," she said. He smirked faintly, then learned fast. He opened a hidden panel in the wall, revealing an old maintenance shaft that led to the back of the valley. "It's narrow and dark, but it leads to the cliffs," he said. Lyra hesitated. "You're helping me?" Jake didn't answer right away. He just looked at the tiny trembling girl with the impossible burden, then he said, "You asked for help, didn't you?" "Well, I'm not the kind of man who turns away a kid running from a monster." They crawled into the shaft as the radar dots came closer. Behind them, the workshop lights flickered as scanners swept the building. Jake and Lyra held their breath, the hum of alien engines vibrating through the metal. Through a small grate, Jake could see armored boots and hear voices. Cold, mechanical, and cruel. One of them said, "She can't have gone far. Commander Varric will burn this outpost if she's not found." At the sound of that name, Lyra froze, her eyes filled with tears again. But she stayed silent, gripping the satchel as if her mother's heart was whispering courage to her. When the soldiers left, Jake exhaled slowly. They crawled for what felt like hours, until the tunnel opened into a wide canyon, golden light breaking through the morning clouds. Jake looked at the girl, her face lit by the sun for the first time. She looked fragile, but inside those glowing eyes burned something strong. "We're not safe yet," Jake said quietly. "But we've got a head start." Lyra nodded. Clutching the satchel close, She's still with me, she whispered. Jake didn't fully understand what she meant. But somehow he believed her, because deep in that crystal glow, he swore he could hear a heartbeat too, faint but alive, and that scared him more than anything he had ever seen before. The sun had barely risen above the canyon walls when the air began to tremble. A deep rhythmic hum spread through the dust, like the heartbeat of a giant machine waking up. Jake froze mid-step, shielding his eyes from the light. Lyra stopped beside him, clutching the satchel tighter. Her pupils narrowed, glowing brighter in the sun. "They found us," she whispered. Jake turned his head toward the horizon. 3 dark shapes were cutting through the clouds, silver-black crafts moving fast and low. Their engines left trails of smoke that shimmered against the morning sky. Rusty beeped a warning tone, his sensors flaring red. Jake grabbed the small droid's side panel and switched him into silent mode. "Stay low," he ordered Lyra, "and follow my lead." They ducked behind a pile of jagged rocks at the edge of the canyon. The crafts descended, kicking up waves of sand. Through the swirling dust, armored figures emerged, tall aliens, wearing black combat suits with glowing red visors. They moved like shadows, silent and precise. Jake counted 6 soldiers, and one stood taller than the rest, the only one without a helmet. His face was cold, marked with scars that glowed faintly under his skin. Lyra's breath caught, and she whispered one word. "Father?" Jake turned to her sharply. "That's him?" She nodded, trembling. Commander Varric, the name the soldiers had spoken last night, was real, and standing just a few meters away, his voice echoed through the canyon, powerful and filled with command. "Search the area. She's close. I can feel her energy," he barked. The soldiers fanned out, scanners glowing on their wrists. Sweeping the terrain, Jake's mind raced. If those scanners picked up heat or energy traces, they wouldn't last 5 minutes. He leaned closer to Lyra and whispered, "What do those scanners detect?" "Essence signatures," she whispered back. "They can sense life energy, hers, mine, anything connected to the heart." Jake cursed under his breath. "Then that thing in your bag is basically a beacon," he said. Lyra's eyes widened. "No, wait." But before she could explain, a scanner light flashed red. One of the soldiers shouted, "Reading detected." "Northridge!" Varric turned instantly, his eyes glowing with alien fire. Jake didn't think. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the side tunnel. "Run!" he yelled. The sound of plasma rifles charging filled the air, followed by a burst of blue light that exploded against the rocks. Sand and debris flew around them. Lyra stumbled, Jake caught her arm, and they sprinted through the narrow canyon path. Rusty rolled behind them, projecting a jamming field that distorted the soldiers' scanners for a few seconds. They reached a cluster of broken mining vehicles abandoned long ago. Jake dove behind one and yanked open a hatch. "Inside," he said. Lyra crawled in. Panting hard, Jake followed, slamming the hatch shut. The sound of boots echoed outside, and heavy, deliberate and getting closer. From a small viewing slit, Jake could see Varric walking through the wreckage, his eyes scanning every shadow. His voice was deep and calm now, almost like a whisper. "Lyra, come out, my child." His words carried a strange sadness, mixed with menace. "You cannot run from your blood," he continued. "You carry her heart, but it belongs to me now." Lyra's lips quivered. Tears forming, Jake put a hand on her shoulder, whispering, "Don't move. Don't answer him." But she looked at Jake with guilt. "He's my father." Jake shook his head. "He's a hunter now, not a father." Outside, the commander stopped. His eyes turned toward their hiding spot, as if he could feel them there. "Do you think that human can protect you?" he shouted suddenly, voice sharp like thunder. "He doesn't understand what he's holding. That heart will consume him." Jake clenched his jaw. He could feel the faint hum from the satchel now. The same pulse he'd seen before. It was reacting to her fear. He whispered, "Lyra, stay calm. Whatever that thing is, it listens to you." She closed her eyes, clutching the satchel tightly, breathing slowly, and for a moment, the pulsing light dimmed. Outside, one soldier pointed toward their direction. "Energy spike!" Varric raised his hand, charging his weapon. But before he could fire, a massive explosion rocked the ridge above them. One of the parked mining fuel tanks had detonated. Rusty's self-defense protocol flames and debris burst across the canyon. Knocking the soldiers off balance, Jake seized the moment, pulling Lyra from the hatch. "Now!" They sprinted through the smoke and fire, the sky filled with the roar of engines and falling metal. Behind them, Varric shouted, "Lyra, You're dooming them all! But she didn't look back for the first time. She wasn't just running away. She was running toward something, toward freedom, toward the unknown. Jake grabbed her hand tighter as they disappeared into the rising smoke. The world behind them burned, and above the noise, the faint hum of the heart crystal pulsed stronger, as if it was awakening, and though Jake didn't know it yet, the pulse would soon change the fate of worlds. Smoke still drifted behind them, curling up into the early sky like fading ghosts. Jake and Lyra moved through the canyon's shadowed trails until the air grew thin and silent. Neither spoke for a long time, their lungs burning, their hearts pounding. Every sound and every falling pebble made them flinch. Only when the mountains finally swallowed the noise of engines did Jake slow down. Resting against a jagged boulder, Lyra collapsed beside him, her small frame trembling with exhaustion, the satchel still pressed tight against her chest. Its light, once dim and pulsing, now flickered unevenly, as though the energy inside it was losing rhythm. Jake leaned closer, eyes narrowing. That thing. It's not just a power source, is it? Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she stared at the glowing core through the torn fabric, the light reflecting in her eyes like stars caught in tears. Finally, she whispered, "It's not a weapon." Jake frowned. "Then why do they want it?" Her voice cracked. "Because they think it can make one." She turned toward him, and for the first time he saw not a frightened child, but a survivor of something far worse. "My mother wasn't like my father," she said softly. "She was kind. She didn't believe in conquest or empire. She wanted to heal the planets my father destroyed." Jake listened quietly as the desert wind howled around them. Lyra held the crystal between her palms, its pulse growing steady again. When she realized what father was planning, she continued. She used her life essence, her own core, to stop him. Her voice wavered. She sealed her heart in this crystal, a living soulstone, one that could give energy and or take it away. Jake's brow furrowed. Take it away? Lyra nodded slowly. It can drain life. Not destroy, but silence. It can stop entire machines, armies, even worlds, by pulling the power out of everything. Her voice trembled. And father wants it because he doesn't care what it costs. He just wants control. Jake stared at the glowing crystal. A tool of life and death. Something made from love but capable of ending countless lives. He rubbed his temples, muttering, "You're carrying the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." She looked down. "I'm carrying my mother." Silence fell between them again. Jake looked over the ridge. The horizon shimmered with heat. No ships in sight for now, but he knew that wouldn't last. "Your father won't stop," he said, "and the more we run, the more that crystal wakes up." Lyra hugged it tighter, whispering, "I know. She's protecting me." Jake exhaled slowly, unsure if she was speaking metaphorically, or if the crystal truly had a will of its own. Rusty beeped quietly beside them, projecting a flickering map hologram. Jake crouched to examine it. A small mining settlement appeared 20 clicks west, abandoned years ago. "Shelter," he said, "we can rest there. Maybe fix communications." But when he looked back at Lyra, she seemed distracted, staring into the distance. "Something's coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Before Jake could ask what she meant, the crystal in her hands began to glow brighter, too bright. Its pulse quickened, matching her heartbeat, and then faintly, a voice echoed, not in sound but directly in Jake's mind. "Protect her, child of Earth." Jake jerked back, eyes wide. He looked at Lyra. She hadn't spoken. "What did you just—" he began, but she looked at him with confusion. "You heard her too?" she asked softly. "My mother's voice?" The realization sent chills through him. That wasn't just energy. It was consciousness, living, aware, watching. The soul trapped inside the crystal could reach across minds. Jake swallowed hard, his throat dry. "So she's alive," he muttered. "Not fully," Lyra said sadly, "but enough to protect me. Enough to warn us." She touched the crystal gently, and it dimmed again. Then she looked up at Jake, her eyes full of quiet resolve. "If we can reach the neutral zone, the human-controlled sector, we can hide her essence. No one will find it there." Jake hesitated. "That's halfway across the desert." "I can make it," she said. "If you help me?" He studied her, this tiny alien girl with the universe's burden in her hands, and finally nodded. "All right," he said. "We'll make it. But we need to move smart." He checked his weapon's power cell, and half drained. then pointed to the horizon. We travel by night, rest by day. If we're lucky, the scanners won't pick us up. As the twin suns dipped lower, painting the cliffs in orange fire, they began walking again. The desert wind howled behind them, erasing their footprints, but something unseen followed. High above, a black drone hovered silently. Recording every move, Commander Varric watched through its red lens, a faint smile on his scarred face. "So that's where you've been hiding, little one," he murmured. His eyes glowed brighter, filled with cold determination. "Keep running. Daughter, I'll come for both of you soon." Back on the ground, Jake and Lyra disappeared into the deepening twilight. The crystal hummed quietly, its faint blue glow reflecting in Jake's tired eyes. He didn't know what they were walking into: war, peace, or something in between. But one thing had become painfully clear. The girl he had chosen to protect wasn't just running from her father. She was carrying the heartbeat of a dying civilization, and whether they survived or not, the galaxy would never be the same again. The wasteland stretched endlessly before them, a sea of cracked red stone and whispering dunes that swallowed the horizon. The twin suns hung above like burning eyes, and heat shimmered in waves, twisting the air into illusions. Jake adjusted the filter on his mask and checked the scanner. No signals yet, but he knew better than to trust the silence. He glanced back at Lyra, who trudged behind him, her cloak fluttering in the hot wind, the satchel clutched close to her chest. Each step she took seemed heavy, as if the crystal itself carried the weight of the entire galaxy. They had been walking for hours. Rusty rolled beside them, the droid's surface coated in dust, occasionally projecting a faint navigation beacon to keep them on course. The map pointed west, toward an abandoned mining settlement once used by human colonists before the war. If it still stood, it might hold supplies or a communication terminal. But in this wasteland, nothing lasted long, not even hope. Jake shaded his eyes and scanned the horizon. The endless dunes reminded him of Earth's deserts, though this world's sun burned harsher and its wind carried a strange metallic taste. He spoke without turning. "You holding up, kid?" Lyra nodded weakly. "I'm fine," she lied. Her glowing skin was dulling, the marks along her arms fading as exhaustion took hold. Jake slowed his pace. "We'll rest soon," he said. Just a little further, they stopped at a ridge overlooking a dried riverbed, the bones of an ancient waterway. Jake set down his pack and unfolded a small solar sheet for shade. Rusty beeped and extended its small limbs, pulling up thin metal sheets to block the wind. Lyra sat beneath the cover, silent, staring at the crystal as it pulsed faintly through the torn satchel. Jake handed her a canteen. "Drink. You'll dehydrate fast out here." She nodded and sipped slowly, her gaze lost in the shifting dunes. After a while, she whispered, "Do you ever get tired of running?" Jake looked at her, surprised by the question. He thought for a moment, then said quietly, "Everyone runs from something. Some people just run longer than others." Lyra looked down. "I've been running since the day she died." The wind howled outside their shelter. Jake leaned forward, his tone softer. "You miss her?" She nodded. "When she was alive, everything felt warm. Even the stars looked closer." Her fingers brushed the glowing crystal. "Now, I only hear her voice in dreams." Jake didn't know how to comfort someone carrying their mother's soul in a bag, so he said the only thing he could, "Then don't stop dreaming. That's how you keep her close." For a while, they sat in silence. Then Rusty's alarm broke it. A faint beeping from the sensor grid. Jake's head shot up. Movement. He crawled to the ridge and looked through his binoculars. Faint shadows moved across the sand. Too smooth to be animals, too fast to be the wind, drones. He realized, and scouting units, time to move, he said. Packing up fast, they set off again, this time moving through the dry riverbed to stay hidden. Lyra followed close, her breathing shallow, her small footprints vanishing quickly in the wind. As night fell, the world cooled to steel blue silence. The sky filled with two moons, one silver, one dark, and the stars stretched endless above them. Jake led the way, using his wrist light sparingly. The only constant glow came from the satchel, the soft blue heartbeat of the crystal. Hours later, they reached what looked like a metallic hill. Half buried in the sand, Jake brushed the dust away and smiled faintly. "We're here, the mining settlement." He pried open a rusted door, and a gust of cold, stale air greeted them. Inside, the darkness smelled of old oil and burnt circuits. Rusty lit the space with a faint beam, revealing collapsed beams, empty crates and long-dead machinery. Not much left, Jake muttered. But it's better than open sand. They set up camp inside a small control room still intact. Lyra curled up in the corner, her cloak wrapped tight. Jake worked on a damaged console, trying to restore partial power. When the screen flickered alive, he leaned closer, static hissed. Then a signal marker blinked, and faint but there, a human distress frequency. Weak but reachable, Jake smiled slightly. We might just have a chance, but then... The console flashed red, signal intercepted. Jake's smile vanished. Damn it. He slammed the switch, but it was too late somewhere out there. The transmission had been caught. Lyra stirred, sensing the sudden tension. What happened? Jake looked at her grimly. They know where we are. A low rumble shook the walls, distant engines echoing through the canyon. Rusty beeped in alarm, projecting red scanner dots rapidly approaching. Lyra clutched the satchel, panic in her eyes. He's coming. Jake loaded his plasma rifle. Then we're not running this time. He looked at her firmly. If they take you, they get that crystal. If they get it, everything ends. Her small hands trembled. Then what do we do? Jake's expression hardened. We fight. Together. Outside, the sands began to glow red as the crafts descended again. The silence of the desert broke into the roar of engines and the crack of thunder. Inside the abandoned outpost, the faint heartbeat of the crystal grew louder. Not just a hum, a call, and somewhere deep inside that light, the voice of Lyra's mother stirred once more. He will come for you. But the heart will choose who survives. Jake tightened his grip on the rifle. Lyra stood behind him, her eyes glowing brighter than before this time. She wasn't the frightened child he had met in the storm. This time she looked ready, and as the first blast hit the sand outside, the war between father and daughter, love and power, finally began to awaken. The sky above the wasteland split open with fire. 3 alien gunships descended through the smoke, their engines roaring like thunder. Jake could feel the tremor beneath his boots as sand scattered across the ruined mining camp. He gritted his teeth, pulling Lyra behind the wall of the control tower. Rusty beeped frantically, its sensors flashing crimson. They were surrounded. Stay low, Jake whispered. Reloading his plasma rifle, through the broken window, he could see dark shapes moving through the dust. Armored soldiers with glowing visors. Each step they took shook the ground, heavy, precise, merciless. And then he saw him, Commander Varric, stepping down from the lead ship, his long coat flared behind him, and his crimson eyes burned brighter than the flames around him. He wasn't running anymore, he was here to end this. Lyra. Varric's voice echoed through the canyon, cold yet almost sorrowful. You can't hide from your blood. His words carried like a spell. Soft, haunting, almost gentle, but every syllable dripped with control. Jake clenched his jaw, whispering to Lyra, "Don't listen to him." But she was trembling, the satchel glowing faintly in her arms. "I can feel him," she said softly. "He's calling her." "My mother's heart," Jake glanced at her. "What do you mean, calling her?" Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide and glowing. "He can speak to the crystal. He made it with her once. Their souls are connected," Jake cursed under his breath. "Then we've got one more reason to make sure he doesn't touch it." A blinding flash struck the ground beside them. The soldiers were firing now. Plasma bolts tore through metal beams, sending sparks flying. Jake pulled Lyra down, shielding her with his body. Rusty deployed a small barrier dome, deflecting the next volley. The air was thick with heat and sand, and the smell of ozone filled the ruins. Jake rolled out from cover, aimed, and fired. 2 precise bursts struck one soldier square in the chest, sending him crashing into the sand, but 3 more advanced, their armor glowing like molten iron. He ducked back just as another beam scorched the wall beside his head. "Rusty, decoy mode," Jake shouted. The droid beeped twice, then rolled into the open, projecting 3 holographic copies of Jake across the field. The soldiers turned their aim, firing wildly at the illusions. Jake used the distraction to drag Lyra toward the lower tunnels. But before they could descend, a voice froze them in place. "Stop running." Varric stood at the far end of the corridor. Up close, he looked even more inhuman. His skin pale as stone, veins glowing with faint red light. He didn't raise his weapon, he didn't need to. The energy around him pulsed. The air itself seemed to obey his will. He took a step forward, his gaze fixed on the satchel. "You can't protect her forever. Human, he said, his tone calm but dangerous. That heart was never yours to keep. Jake raised his rifle. Maybe not. But she doesn't belong to you either. Varric tilted his head slightly. Do you even know what you're guarding? He asked. That heart contains the power to reshape worlds, to stop time itself. Your kind doesn't understand what it is. Jake's voice was steady. Maybe not. But I understand what she is. A child running from a monster. Varric's expression darkened. He stepped closer, energy crackling along his fingertips. She is my daughter, he hissed, and that crystal is mine by birthright. The words made Lyra flinch, tears glimmering in her glowing eyes. Jake stood between them, unwavering. Then maybe it's time someone took that right away from you, he said quietly. Varric lifted his hand. A surge of red lightning erupted. Jake dove aside as the blast tore through the floor, throwing metal shards into the air. Rusty was hit square in the body, its circuits sparking as it fell. Rusty! Jake shouted. Crawling toward it, the droid flickered weakly, projecting one last hologram, a warning symbol flashing over Varric's head. He was charging another blast, this one aimed at Lyra. No! She screamed, raising the crystal instinctively. A wave of blue light exploded outward, forming a shimmering shield between them. The blast hit it, and for a moment, the entire canyon shook. Blue and red light collided, energy screaming into the sky like lightning made of souls. Varric staggered back, his eyes wide. Impossible! She's awakening it! The light faded, and Lyra collapsed into Jake's arms, gasping for air. The crystal's glow dimmed, not dead, but drained. Jake looked down at her, then up at Varric, fury burning in his chest. You call yourself a father, he spat, but all I see is a coward hiding behind power. Varric smiled faintly, his expression almost pitying. You have no idea what power is, he said, his voice low. Then he vanished, dissolving into red mist that scattered with the wind. Jake held Lyra tighter as the last echoes faded. The silence afterward felt heavy, suffocating. He looked at the broken droid, the scorched sand, the glowing heart still pulsing weakly. It wasn't over, not even close. Varric hadn't retreated. He was waiting, gathering strength. And Jake knew the final confrontation would decide far more than their lives. He lifted Lyra gently. Come on, kid, he whispered. We're getting out of here. As they walked into the fading light, the crystal flickered. And somewhere far beyond the wasteland, Varric's ship turned in the sky. The war between love and blood had begun, and the universe was holding its breath, waiting for who would claim the heart of a dying star. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the wasteland, painting the cracked red earth in shades of gold and fire. Smoke still rose in the distance where Varric's ships had fallen, their wreckage half buried beneath the dunes. Jake stood at the edge of the canyon, his rifle slung over his shoulder, staring at the horizon. The wind had changed, softer now, carrying the scent of dust and metal, but also something faintly alive. Behind him, Lyra stirred, wrapped in a torn blanket, the satchel resting beside her like a sleeping heart. For the first time in days, there were no engines, no scanners, no pursuit, only silence, a silence so pure it almost frightened him. He crouched beside her, brushing the dust from her hair. You're safe, he said softly, his voice raw from exhaustion. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly in the sunrise. Is it over? She asked, her voice fragile as glass. Jake hesitated, then nodded. For now. Lyra sat up slowly, her gaze falling to the crystal. It pulsed faintly, weaker than before, but steady. The light inside it was calm, like the rhythm of a steady heartbeat after a long storm. Jake had seen enough war to know what peace looked like, and this was the closest he'd ever come. They spent the morning burying the wreckage of what remained. Rusty's small, burnt frame lay near the edge of the outpost, the droid that had followed Jake for 7 long years. He dug a shallow grave in the sand and placed a metal plate on top, scratched with the words, "He stayed until the end." Lyra knelt beside it, placing a single glowing shard from the broken crystal core of her mother's heart. "For protection," she whispered, "so his light never fades." Jake didn't say anything. He just nodded, his throat too tight for words. By noon, they had set up a small shelter inside a half-collapsed cave. Lyra helped him repair the solar cells, her small hands surprisingly steady despite the exhaustion. When the lights flickered on, her face lit up with quiet wonder. "Humans always rebuild," she said softly. "Even when everything's broken." Jake chuckled, sitting beside her. "We don't have much choice. It's either rebuild or disappear." She tilted her head, curious. "Is that why you helped me?" Jake looked at her for a long time before answering. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe because no one helped me when I needed it." The afternoon sun dimmed behind thick clouds. They sat together, eating the last of their rations. Lyra suddenly spoke again, her voice quiet. "She's still here, you know." Jake looked up. "Who?" "My mother," she said, touching the satchel gently. "I can feel her in the light. She's resting now, but she's watching." Jake smiled faintly. "Then let her rest. You've done what she wanted." Lyra shook her head. "No, she wanted more than my safety. She wanted peace." Her glowing eyes turned toward the endless sky. "And peace doesn't come from running. It comes from rebuilding." Jake studied her, a child who had lost her world yet spoke like someone far older than her years. He realized that whatever her mother had given her wasn't just protection, it was strength. The kind that doesn't come from power, but from purpose. That night, as the stars emerged one by one, Lyra stood outside the cave holding the now dim crystal up to the sky. "Do you think the stars can hear us?" she asked. Jake stepped beside her, watching the glittering expanse above. "Maybe," he said, "and maybe they're listening more closely than we think." The wind carried her laughter, soft, tired, but real. It was the first time he'd heard it, and it reminded him of sunlight after a storm. As the night deepened, the faint hum of the crystal began to shift. It grew brighter, not wild or violent, but peaceful, glowing like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. Lyra closed her eyes, tears running down her cheeks. "She's saying goodbye," she whispered. "She's free now." The light rose from her palms, lifting into the sky like a floating soul. Jake watched as it drifted higher and higher until it vanished among the stars, leaving only a faint shimmer that lingered in the air. When it was gone, Lyra sank to her knees, her voice trembling but calm. "It's quiet," she said, "for the first time in my life. It's quiet." Jake placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's what peace sounds like," he said gently. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a strange mix of grief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving me back to him." Jake shook his head. "You don't thank someone for doing what's right." Dawn broke again the next morning, soft and golden. The desert seemed gentler now, the wind no longer howling but whispering through the rocks. Lyra stepped outside, watching the sunlight dance across the dunes. She turned to Jake with a small, steady smile. "What will we do now?" she asked. Jake looked toward the horizon, where the ruins of the past faded into light. "We'll build," he said simply. "We'll fix what's left, and maybe help others do the same." Years later, travelers would tell stories of a quiet human, engineer, and a glowing alien girl who lived on the edge of the wasteland. Together, they repaired old ships, rescued lost wanderers, and helped rebuild villages destroyed by war. They never spoke of the heart that once burned brighter than any sun. But some nights, when the wind was still, a faint blue shimmer could be seen above their home, a gentle pulse in the stars. As if the galaxy itself remembered, the war was over, the storms had passed, and in their place something new had begun. A promise, a home, and the dawn of peace born not from power, but from kindness.